That's great. So, first of all, I want to say a very warm welcome to everybody attending today's Global Book Club. My name is Elizabeth Adams. I'm a board member of the Nursing Now Challenge, and it's my absolute privilege to actually moderate this session featuring the work of a renowned author, researcher, academic, educator, inspirational leader, and I could go on forever, Professor Dame Anne-Marie Rafferty, whose book, The Politics of Nursing Knowledge, is our focus today. And just to put Nursing Now in context, it was established in 2018 with the aim of creating an international movement to champion the profession. The board is chaired by Dame Christine Beasley. She's a former Chief Nursing Officer of England. She's also a trustee of the Burdett Trust for Nursing. And that's very important because the Nursing Now Challenge is a program of the Burdett Trust for Nursing. We would be lost without the support and funding in relation to that. And we have Professor Claire Cable, who's the Chief Executive Officer of the Burdett Trust for Nursing, is actually on the board as well. And we get great support. The Nursing Now Challenge champions leadership, development opportunities for student and early career nurses and midwives around the world. And after this past 4 years, it has only gained momentum, and it has evolved into an absolutely international piece of machinery that supports young career nurses and midwives all over the world. And some of the recent statistics, they're absolutely amazing, are that there's nearly 218,000 members of the Nursing Now Challenge, and our members are made up of over 1,192 organizations and over 1,000, nearly 300 individuals. And listen to this, in 131 countries. There are now more than 380 nurses and midwives from 59 countries in the Challenges Committee. And there's a number of initiatives within this Nursing Now umbrella, and I don't have enough time to tell you all about it. But one of the ones that was launched recently because of the broad range of initiatives is the 1,000 Challenge, recently launched, which is a global research leadership initiative to help nurses and midwives and other allied health professionals set up pragmatic and achievable studies designed to solve challenging healthcare issues within the workplace. And in order for you to know more about this, I invite you on the 14th of February at 11 a.m. GMT in order to join us, and it's going to showcase what this is all about. And you may have an interest, not now, maybe in the future. So please do join us. And none of this could happen without the absolute exceptional and wonderful leadership of Professor Aisha Holloway. She's the Chair of Nursing Studies, the University of Edinburgh. She's the Programme Director of the Nursing Now Challenge. She's the Co-Director of the Edinburgh Global Nursing Initiative. And she is doing brilliant work, inspiring us all and leading us all in the future. So thank you for that. And of course, I have to thank Hannah Finch, Director of External Relationships, and Faye Knight, who is the project manager, who in the background make all these things happen. The team are incredible, what they do for us to support us going forward. So I have very little to do today once I stop talking here, as our dynamic panel of young Nursing Now leaders, they will focus on 3 chapters, the introduction, registration and conclusion of the book, The Politics of Nursing Knowledge, and they will introduce themselves and have the discussion directly with Professor Dame Anne-Marie Rafferty. So I want to welcome our panel, which is Dr. Amoke, and she is a registered nurse and already her PhD, I can call her, and she's from Nigeria. And I want to welcome Sung Po as well, who is the Western Pacific Regional Hub Lead of the Challenges Committee, another arm of work that goes on. And I also want to welcome Andrea Gomez, who's a registered nurse from Spain. And they're the panel who are going to be discussing with Anne-Marie. And what Anne-Marie is going to do is she is going to present some of her reflections from her seminal book, The Politics of Nursing, which in my opinion is one of the most influential and important books in the profession of nursing and midwifery, certainly in this century. And I can absolutely put my hand in my heart and say that is the case. So I'm just going to introduce you to Professor Dame Anne-Marie Rafferty. She is a dame and a professor of health and nursing policy. She's a former dean of the Florence Nightingale Faculty of Nursing and Midwifery and Palliative Care in King's College London. She's a past president of the Royal College of Nursing. She holds degrees from Edinburgh and Nottingham University, and she is the first nurse. Now, she's many firsts, right? But the first nurse to graduate with a doctorate from Oxford University. So she's a doctor in philosophy and modern history. How extraordinary is that? But it doesn't end there. She is an historian, health, workforce policy researcher, and expert. She was the first nurse to win the prestigious Harkins Fellowship in Health Policy. That's with the University of Pennsylvania. She holds honorary doctorates from a range of universities, including, most importantly, her alma mater, the University of Edinburgh. It's lovely to get recognition from your own home university. She served on the Prime Minister's Commission on the Future of Nursing and Midwifery between 2009 and 10. She has various awards, and as examples, she's the Nursing Times Leadership Award in 2014, the Health Service Journal Top 100 Clinical Leaders Award in 2015. 2017, she was nominated as one of the 70 most influential nurses over the 70 years of the National Health Service. She co-led the Student Commission and the Future of the NHS, supported by NHS England, and she was also a member of the Parliamentary Review of Health and Social Care in Wales in 2018. She was a member of the Times, and I mean the newspaper, the Times Health Commission in 2023, and is a regular commentator in the media. She is an associate fellow of the Health think tank, the Nuffield Trust, and Green Templeton College University. She holds fellowships in the Royal College of Nursing, the Australian College of Nursing, the American Academy of Nursing, and was elected a fellow of the Academy of Medical Science in 2019. She is a member of she was the first nurse to be elected to the National Academies of Science and Health in medicine in the US in 2021. And that is extraordinary, because this is an extraordinary group of Nobel Prize winners and everything. It's incredible. She was awarded Dame Commander of the British Empire from Her Majesty the Queen Elizabeth at the time for her services in nursing in 2020. And you just won't believe that she's been appointed a life peer to the House of Lords by the Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, in 2025. And can you imagine what Anne-Marie will achieve and deliver in the next years going forward? And we can only congratulate her from the bottom of our heart and just be in awe of the brilliant. And I really wanted to read out, particularly for our young career nurses, to show all the amazing opportunities that are out there in the world. But there's very few people now like Anne-Marie that will get them. So without further delay, I'm going to hand over to my wonderful colleague, Anne-Marie, Dame Anne-Marie, and she's going to give you a few key themes and overview of the book, and then that will be followed by our panel, who will introduce themselves and discuss. So over to you, Anne-Marie. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Elizabeth, and for that fulsome introduction. I'm humbled by the presence of our students and, of course, our special guests as well. And it's wonderful to feel I'm amongst friends with Rowita and Claire Cable here from the Burdett Trust, and Paul Durava from European Federation of Nurses, and others, and of course our wonderful Aisha. So it's just terrific to be here. Look, I just want to say that this book, although it was published in 1996, and that does seem like quite a long time ago, was actually born when I was a student. So, you know, the first lesson is all those ideas and issues that just vex you, bother you, and keep nibbling away at your brain, don't try to push them away. Try to do something with those, because one of the questions that I was asking as a student was, and you know, we're all in clinical areas where we're basically working with doctors and, you know, medical students. And in fact, I think that's one of the questions that, you know, we might hear more about is, well, how is it that doctors learn what they learn and we learn what we learn? And it always seemed to me that those boundaries were not really firm and fast, that they were much more porous than the textbooks would have us believe. And I was a bit naughty as a student because I shared flats with medical students. So I used to sneak along to some of their lectures. And so got a, you know, a broader view of the dividing intellectual, if you like, division of labor between nursing and medicine. And it was clear that power, you know, knowledge is power, we know that. But how does it actually work in everyday kind of clinical practice? And that was something that preoccupied me then, and it still rather preoccupies me now. So I got interested in history as one way to look at this. And I'm not going to dwell on this, but I started off looking at the origins of nurse education and, you know, the apprenticeship system essentially that grew up with Florence Nightingale. But do you know what, guys? There's a paradox at the heart of this, which is Nightingale never wrote a textbook on nursing education. She wrote a book, Notes on Nursing, but it was helpful hints as to how to look after the sick in their own homes, which I have to say bears rereading today when we're thinking about public and population health and how to look after people in their own homes. There's lots of brilliant top tips in that book, which are still relevant today. So although Nightingale is often credited with being the architect of modern day nursing, she didn't codify nursing knowledge or the curriculum. In fact, she never sets foot in St. Thomas's Hospital, which bears, you know, her name as the Nightingale School, of which we're the direct descendant here. So it's interesting, is a curriculum had to be crafted, and that was partly the work of the home sisters, as they were called, in hospitals at St. Thomas's. The first was created in 1860. And the doctors who ended up teaching. So I got really interested in how do you build a knowledge base from scratch, basically. Well, let's just pull back. That's the formal knowledge base, because it's not as if they're not people who've been undertaking nursing before. And getting into the reform politics of nursing, we know that the first reformers were basically reacting against what they called the untrained Gamps, the Sarah Gamp characters who were featured in Charles Dickens' novel Martin Chuzzlewit. And they were condemned as being the antithesis of everything that the new nurses of that first reform movement wanted to bring in and wanted to become. You know, they were criticized for being slovenly, unhygienic, unchristian, and ignorant slatterns, you know, women of lost morals. So the new birth of nursing that arose partly from the reforms that Nightingale ushered in, also through her huge output in other areas of endeavour, hospital statistics, data, science, and indeed the reform of the civilian and military hospitals across different continents. I mean, what Nightingale achieved is so huge. It's very difficult to nutshell. But that plus the roots of nursing from Christian charity and the sisterhoods that developed in England at the time, this sense of nursing as a morally virtuous activity, which would allow women, because there were cultural taboos around this, working in a public sphere such as a hospital without being chaperoned. You know, there's all these new codes of conduct, all these behaviors that had to be negotiated in women working in these environments. And so hence we get a mixture of formal, if you like, medical knowledge and biology and chemistry and these subjects mixed up with, you know, advice on how to conduct yourself as a woman. And that blend is really what became, you know, put it in the blender and out comes the sort of late 19th century vision and view of nursing. But from that, we had another group of reformers. So all of this goes in waves, led by the redoubtable Mrs. Bedford Fenwick, who was an amazing and colourful and charismatic character. And she wanted to, after nursing became very popular because it was income generating for hospitals, right? So it spread and the students were used as a labour force to basically support the workforce needs of the hospital. You know, they were entirely subordinate to that, but they got their training and their ticket in advance, after which they could go and work in the community organisations that were then employing nurses, institutes as they were called, of which the Queen's Nursing Institute was probably the most prevalent, but there were other private ones, as well as other hospitals. So because healthcare was becoming more popular with the middle classes, previously hospitals were places no one wanted to go. But we saw this modernising middle class movement arising from Mrs. Bedford Fenwick and her group of friends and allies who were working with her to establish nursing very much along the same lines and the education as women entering universities. And in the journal that she edited, the British Journal of Nursing, she openly advocated for this. And I think this is another way in which the influence of nursing reform and the pegging of the standard, the aspiration was that nursing could become, even at that stage, a university accredited subject. Now that was an aspiration because it only ever applied to a small minority of women. And there were huge battles for women to, you know, break down the barriers to entering the male bastion of higher education. You know, even Virginia Woolf didn't manage it. So, you know, our famous author. So the pegging level and the ambition of that first group of reformers, who also, we're going to talk a little bit about the first wave of reform to design a new law to license and standardize nursing education through nurse registration, was to locate nursing as a higher ambition for women, as a job where women could actually ply their trade and operate independently in the labour market, because this was not possible for middle class women. It was, you know, as Nightingale herself faced fiendish opposition, it was unseemly for middle class women to do so. So that was where the tent peg was punctured into the ground, and that was thanks to the Registration Act in England, which was behind some other countries. We were not the first. New Zealand was the first. In 1918, after the First World War, we got a Registration Act which acknowledged the standards for entry into the profession, of which education was one. But there was a huge battle, which we'll talk a little bit about later. But once nursing got into the hospitals, as part of the labour force, it became very difficult to unlock it from its place in the labour, a system of labour. And this was partly what Mrs. Bedford-Fenwick and her colleagues were trying to do. They wanted to release nursing from the clutches of hospital management and exploitation. And she used that very dramatic language. She talked about servitude of the profession in the hospitals. And of course, Henry Burdett was her most fiercest opponent and enemy. He was anathema to her. And here we are years later, you know, applauding the bequest from the Royal National Pension Fund, which became the Burdett Trust. So it took essentially the unlocking and leashing and freeing, if you like, of nursing from the clutches of the service provider relationship with hospitals some 70 years later before we see any movement towards getting back to a position that Bedford-Fenwick was advocating way back in the late 19th century. And in the meantime, they tried to link nursing to technical education and reforms in technical education after the First World War. But that was only partially successful. What happened was that really it got stuck. You know, nursing was really bolted into this very unfortunate, for some would argue, relationship with the hospital labour system. And that didn't really change despite best efforts until we had the first university, Edinburgh University, offering undergraduate courses in the 1960s. And then the move further into higher education at least in England in 2013. So it's been a long, long haul with many stops and starts along the way. So I was interested in what the arc of change was, how we can start with high ambition in one period, and then you get into a position where you enter a trough that is, once you're locked in, it's very difficult to get out from. So maybe I'll just leave that there as the arc of change, but we can talk further. I don't want to take up too much time, probably already done so.
All right, thanks, Anne-Marie, and I'll hand over to the panel. Amoke, I think they're going to cover some of the key themes that you actually outlined. So I'll hand over to the panel now. Dr. Amoke, I think you're going first.
Yeah, thank you so much, Prof, for coming for this book reading club. And my name is Aramoke, a registered nurse and a graduate of the University of Edinburgh. And I'm so excited to be here discussing with Professor Anne Rafferty. And
Anne-Marie, please.
Anne-Marie.
Too much of the mouthful.
All right.
Yeah.
So to start with, I indicated interest to participate in this discussion for two reasons. And first of it would be that I am so interested and passionate about the history of nursing. And, you know, when I saw the title of the book, I was like, oh no, I want to see how we got here. What happened? What's the history like? And where we started from? Because what we say in my country, like in my own, where I come from in Africa, is that you don't know what strategy you need to fight a war if you don't know your history, if you don't know where you're coming from. So I've been that professional nurse who has always struggled with interprofessional rivalry. I'm always thinking in my head, what is happening here? Why the difference in the treatment? Why is one inferior to the other? I've always been in that space. And when I saw that book, I fell in love. I felt I was going to be a discussant on this book. And secondly, because it's Prof. Dean Anne-Marie. I have met her in person and I saw that name. I'm like, oh no, I would like to meet her again. So thank you, Prof, for putting down the history of our profession, all that happened, because you were not compelled to have written this. You did it out of passion, and it's sort of a benefit to some of us now. I read it and I felt like I fell in love more with you, putting something down for our generation to read and see where we are coming from. So, having said all of that, so I read through the introduction, and I liked the foundation that you laid, your inspiration, your mom being one of them, the history and all of that. But the one that fascinated me most was your chapter, the chapter on registration revisited. And, you know, because I've always fought this battle in my head. So going on page 43, I saw something by, there was somebody you mentioned, Brian Abel Smith, who you characterized what he said about the registration as a battle and how we got here, how we got on the register. And, you know, at some point, as I was reading along, I understood that, you know, it got to a point where legislators wanted to
I think we lost him okay there, did we?
Yeah, I think her internet might have failed her. Do you want to carry on, and we'll come back to her when she...
Yeah. Have you any comments, Anne-Marie, in relation to that? We're just...
Yeah, the battle question really is, yeah, I think my response to that is that no one gives away power without a struggle. You know, the virtue of any case, be it that nurses should be better educated, there should be some standards around it. And we're still dealing partly with that legacy. Okay, here we are.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't realize I was just talking.
You're all right. We got your question. Anne-Marie was just answering it there. I'm okay. So Anne-Marie's, you
Yeah.
can...
Okay, thank you. You got my question.
Okay.
All right, that's fine. Thank you.
Thanks, Aramoke. I'm just talking about the whole concept of a battle as a way of characterizing what is essentially a political campaign. You know, this Nursing Now Challenge is a campaign as well. It's a social movement. And in registration, that lasted for a long time. It was a 30-year battle. Can you imagine holding the torch for 30 years on that issue and trying several times through different parliamentary mechanisms in order to get legislative change and in order to put nurses on the same footing and give some coherence to the whole meaning of nursing and who could call themselves a nurse. And we might actually talk about some of the things that act didn't do that we still have to remedy today. So it was a really fractious battle, not just between the nursing organisations who were the advocates, led by Mrs. Bedford Fenwick. As I mentioned, she was a very colourful and controversial character. And, you know, you either loved her or you didn't love her. I mean, she provoked quite polarised reaction. And I think what she did, though, was that she just stuck to her guns. And this is, you know, persistence, determination is one of the things that has to be the hallmark of the leader. And, you know, be so resilient, and you need that support from your colleagues and allies to enable you to do that. But she was very adept as well at building links with the reform elite of the medical profession as well. The more progressive elements of that, because they saw that this new nursing movement that was emerging in the late 19th century could be of help to them. You know, although there was a critique about nurses bad nurses, you know, less educated nurses, were more likely to do their own thing. They were also difficult to control in terms of their behaviours because they didn't respect authority. One of the kind of contradictions of doctors supporting nurses was that better educated nurses were more compliant with medical authority, not in an unquestioning way, but actually in a way that doctors found really, really helpful and supportive to them, because they understood that, because they had more knowledge what needed to be done and why. So I think she was a very clever campaigner. She also was a brilliant communicator. She founded a journal, British Journal of Nursing. And you need this as well. You need to have communication outlets to get the message out. Like Nursing Now, let's take that parallel, has got webinars and all manner of communication mechanisms that I'm not versed in. But that is absolutely essential to any political movement as well. How do you connect with would-be members, would-be supporters, and inspire them is essential as well.
And I think, Marie, that brings us nicely on to Sung Ho, who has a question for you as well.
Great, thank you.
Okay, I guess it's my turn. Hi. So, I think this book is really thought-provoking in a way, because I've been working with Nursing Now Challenge for almost a year now, and like reading the part that the idea of entering the names of nurses along with their qualification and experience on a common register originated with the Burdett kind of like wows me, and it brings a lot of questions like how to define a good nurse, how to examine the artful part of nursing. The further I read, the further I appreciate the book. I think this is art. The book is art itself. So the question that I have from the book would be dualism. Because dualism is frequently observed throughout the chapter registration revisited, as it has been persistently evident throughout history. So male and female roles, private and public spheres, moral virtue versus technical skills, theoretical education versus practical placements, and distinction between different social classes within nursing organizations. The question is, can we truly separate these facets of the nursing professions into polarized categories? And how does nursing education address or perpetuated these dualisms? And how can we foster a dialogue that embraces nursing as a cohesive whole? Thank you.
Thank you, Sunpo. That's a great question as well. And I think you're right that we can't really separate these things out, but they're used as, if you like, dramatic devices or flags of convenience to accentuate difference and to other what we are trying to replace with a new order or and critique. In many ways, it's a kind of cultural grid, which I drew from anthropology, and particularly the anthropology of Mary Douglas. And it's really helps you understand the way that society valorizes, values, and stigmatizes one group over another. And within that dynamic, how power itself works. And I used that kind of grid loosely to explain the power dynamics and shifts that happened with nurse education and the politics of reform. And, I think understanding what those dynamics are, and it links to the previous question of, we can't do anything on our own. We've got to build common cause and coalitions and alignments with other like-minded groups in order to big up our potential to make the change we want to see happen. And you know, that model as well, I think speaks to the John Kingdom model of policy change. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but what he says is that the policy streams have to align with each other, and then they help to create a window of opportunity. It should be called a window of opportunistic moments, because it's really about luck and contingency. So in the sense, the case of education and registration, which you've started with, there were these political alignments between the suffrage movement and women gaining the vote, women's rights in first wave feminism, and nursing. It speaks to your point about gender, and registration, which was viewed as, in Bedford Fenwick's terms, a form of professional suffrage, giving nurses control over their own destiny. And, you know, that's the type of language she was using. Not coincidental, because she was embedded in the suffrage movement herself, and indeed modeled when she founded different organizations. Honestly, if one of her organizations was blocked, she'd just go and found another one. It was quite extraordinary energy and the resources to keep going. You know, she was magic. And so the International Council of Nurses was basically modeled on the International Council of Women.
Mm-hmm.
And so that kind of patterning, what I was trying to argue, that patterning is what I was looking for in my thesis, and what I was trying to kind of draw out, is that there is a logic to why things happen in the way in which they do. But getting back to your point about gender as well, Erin, I think, you know, it's not, nursing is, of course, dramatically gendered even now, and it was in the 19th century. But of course, there were precedents for men working in nursing in different roles in the asylums, as valets, you know, looking after male patients. And of course, in the army, where there were no female nurses until Nightingale's nurses. And that's partly why she faced such resistance when she went out to Scutari during the Crimean War. You know, I think that we need to be able to kick away the structures that support these dualisms, and by doing that, to critique them, because they are the structures that support stereotypes, and stereotypes don't really bear a full kind of relationship with reality. So we need to attack those and take them on head on, and demonstrate now, really, by breaking down those categories, what nurses do, that they're not stuck in any of these boxes, you know, male, female, that we're all of these things. And that here we are, we're evidence-based, we're well-educated, we're making complex decisions, we're managing risks and trade-offs, and that the skills and capabilities needed are working across, you know, multiple boundaries, and that nursing work is very complex and deeply demanding. And the messaging of that and the crafting of that message is something that comes from, I know it sounds a bit abstract, but, you know, the breaking down of those dualisms. And so you're right to really home in on those, and let's kind of drill into them and break them apart.
Great. Thank you, Anne-Marie. And we might move on to Andrea's then question. And so I'll give the floor to you.
Hi, I'm Andrea. I'm from Spain, and I'm a bedside nurse and an early career nurse. So my question is, after reading your book, my question is more about the future, about the present, about what we can do. So what practical steps can we take as active nurses and early career nurses to have greater influence on the policies shaping our education and practice?
Thank you, Andrea. And I'm not going to say bon dia because that's Catalan, but hola. So it's really interesting. I think there's so many things you can do. I think number one, whatever you do, try to generate and garner support. So be that in the clinical area, you know, build your support network and your support structure. But one way to amplify that is to join your nursing organization. And, you know, there's lots of different forums. I mean, I don't know about the Spanish Nurses Association, but, you know, the Royal College of Nursing has got a forum that helps to support newly qualified nurses, which was actually set up when I was president as well. And, you know, those nurses, I'm a great fan of what I call intergenerational leadership. You know, we learn from you, you learn from us. And there's lots of clinical forums, education for, there's a whole range of resources that you can access from your local organization. But I think there's a lot you can do to engage politically as well. I mean, once upon a time, for example, the Royal College of Nursing offered courses in political leadership, and I was fortunate to be one of the people who helped to shape those courses. And then for some reason, they didn't offer them. I'm hoping they will again. So, you know, getting experience of understanding policy, the mechanics, if you like, the machinery of government. How does government work? How does policy get made? And it's not just the national level. I mean, Spain is a very, you know, it's got a lot of power at the regional level as well. You know, write to your parliamentarians, the people who represent you, go and visit them in their offices, talk to them about your issues. I think, you know, coming from you, someone, you're an expert in your area, and telling politicians what it is like to be an early career nurse. Wow, I'm sure they're going to be blown away, you know, by your lived experience and the challenges and hopefully the solutions that you come up with as well. So engage, get involved, try to understand, network your way into, you know, ways of trying to leverage influence, both at your local, you know, your workplace, your local political level, and indeed at the national level in Madrid and or wherever you happen to be. And I think, you know, we are the most trusted profession. Public have lots of confidence in us. And I think, you know, but we need to be organized as well. And I think that means channeling our energies in a way which means that we don't, you know, one of the reasons why there was so much stop and start with nurse registration is because nursing organizations fell out with each other. You know, we've got to speak with one voice and be united. And I think that's the big, big message. But you've got so much to offer, I think, in terms of the evidence you are generating through your own experience and lived experience, but your expertise that you're developing. And you will be listened to. You will be listened to. People will be eager to hear from you. Well, they probably already are. Maybe you're doing all those things.
No doubt they are, Anne-Marie, and certainly persistence pays. There's no doubt about that. And just in relation to the panel may have another couple of questions, but if anybody has a question and they would like to ask a question, we may be able to take a few. I mightn't be the best at picking out if anybody has their hand up. So if you just flag that. So if not, sure, I'll hand back over to, here, is that Catherine? Do you have a question? You can unmute yourself. Go for it.
Yes, Mom, I do. Thank you so much. Happy to be here. I'm Catherine Maina. Please call me Kate. I'm a UK registered nurse from Kenya. Currently, I am a recipient of Badet Scholarship. Thank you very much. And I'm also a member with the Challengers Committee in Europe now. My question, Prof, is since the inception of nursing, it feels like we have always been trying to assert our place. It seems like we have always been trying to convince the public that we are worthy, convince our policymakers that we are actually professionals. If you remember the previous PM, Rishi Sunak, there's a time he went to one of the NHS hospitals and he talked about how the doctors were treating the patients and the nurses were tucking the patients to sleep. Ma'am, I wonder, Prof, what can we do as nurses be over and beyond the Royal College of Nursing for me in the UK, over and beyond the Nursing Now campaign? What can we do to actually, bring people on board, and so that the people who are coming after us do not have to keep fighting these battles that we have fought, you fought in your generation, the generation before you fought? What can we do, Prof? Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Kate, for that, Catherine, rather, for that great question. I think there's again many different ways to influence, and yes, we can do it through our nursing channels, and that's very important, but there are so many others. I think, for many nurses, and in fact, I was visiting with some who were from Moorfields Hospital, one of our famous eye hospitals in London. And these nurses were just a knockout because they were on a Sunday going to the service in a hospital, in a church in South London, and taking a whole raft of mannequins and educational materials and tools to St. Mark's Church in the Oval, which is a local area in London, quite a deprived area as it happens. And there were many different groups from different African countries there, mainly from Africa. And they were educating after the service, and they had some food. They were educating the public about the congregation, about eye health. Why is that important? Because there are huge inequalities in eye health in minoritized communities, particularly Black and Caribbean populations in the UK. And so the pop-up rate for glaucoma detection, the one area, and treatment is 40% below that of white British people. So, to me, health literacy is one of the most important things we can do. I was so inspired and blown away by this. They also got GPs to go to the church as well, and they were doing routine health checks, blood pressure measurement, and just giving people some advice about things they were worried about. So, I mean, that's just one example of outreach. And, these nurses run by Roxanne, I think Roxanne's from Nigeria originally, and she recently was made a fellow of the Royal College of Nursing, as was Aisha, the same year. This is exactly what we need to be doing, taking health out to people, building further confidence with the public and educating them. But I think there's a lot of patient organizations and from civil society, and I know this is something that the European Federation of Nurses does very well as many of our nursing organizations are linking with these groups as well, civil society, patient groups, and as well as our medical, health colleagues. Wherever we can find influence, we need to try and meet the challenge and that encounter. I think that's how ultimately influence, to me, it's all about building relationships with people, and nurses in their community are in pole position to do that.
Thank you, Anne-Marie, for that very comprehensive answer. And I don't see anybody else on the floor, but I know maybe Amoke or Sung Po or Andre might just have one last question. We're getting close on time now, but I don't know whether one of the panel just has another question to ask.
Well, I can ask my other question, which is a bit away from the battle, and just make it on a lighter note. I just wanted to ask Prof, I understand that your mom's stories of nursing in prison and of wars during the Second World War was your inspiration to become a nurse, and of course a transformational nurse leader at that. So to writing this book and educating us on what happened, what our history is. So what would you say was most shocking or surprising or perhaps exciting for you at the time you were putting these stories together, Prof?
Thank you, Aramoke. Well, do you know what was most exciting for me just getting into the archives. People think they're all dry and dusty, but you have no idea what you're going to find, when you set off on one of these historical studies. It's not like doing, interviews or qualitative research in the sense that you've got, a fair chance of getting some decent data if you talk to people about their issues. Whereas in history, you're at the mercy of, what remains of through a preservation policy. So I think for me, it's that voyage of discovery, but to some extent, it's a journey without maps. And I was looking at a nursing archive in Oxford, the Colonial Nursing Association. I got very interested in the relationship between nursing and empire at one point. And what was most exciting was seeing two things. One was, not the minutes of the committee, blah, blah. The letters that nurses wrote back home about their experiences, that was mind-blowing, and they were all beautifully written, but they were written for a particular audience, which was the secretary of the Colonial Nursing Association. But what we were able to do with those later was to turn the scripts and the words of nurses into, because I thought, gosh, these are very dramatic portraits. We actually managed to work with a scriptwriter and dramatize them for BBC Radio 4 into 4 15-minute plays in a series called Writing the Century. And they were broadcast, oh gosh, it was so many years ago. It might have even been about 2016. But that was, a wonderful find. And there were also quite a lot of photographs. So it just gives you a vivid, window into other people's worlds. And that's one of the things that I love doing, as a person. I love always ferreting around in someone else's world. This is like a privileged rummaging in the attic.
And isn't it wonderful, Anne-Marie, that you're inspired by your own beautiful and brilliant mother? Isn't it great like that inspired you, and you learn so many other things and you think from their perspective what they went through, and so it's a wonderful journey, and it's wonderful to hear about it. I think, Catherine, we're just running out of time. Are you going to have one last quick comment?
Yeah, sorry, just one last question, Prof. It's about nursing as a science subject. Sorry, I recently wrote an article on LinkedIn. I use my social media to communicate about nursing and everything. I recently wrote arguing about nursing as a STEM subject. I wonder, what do we need to do to actually present nursing as a worthy STEM subject and not just as a technical skills kind of profession? Thank you.
Well, I think one of the most important things we can do, Catherine, is to cling on to nursing as, first of all, as a graduate subject, because we're under assault now. I mean, we've just seen in our country, people might not believe this in the rest of the world, one university has cancelled, decided it's going to cut its whole nursing programme. Now, we're going to fight against that. This is the University of Cardiff. Can you believe in a world we live in that that's happening? So I think we need to have dialogue with the relevant authorities about how is a subject defined as a STEM subject and who makes that decision. So we've got to get into the policy debate around that and actually go and lobby and advocate those people, because I agree with you. I think that would help a lot to have it stabilized. But the problem is, once you get historical gains, you can't take any of it for granted. It's a constant battle that we've got to keep, you know, the foot on the pedal with and keep advocating for. But thank you for your work as well. I'm sure it's making a huge difference. And I'd love to read your article, by the way.
Very good. Thanks, Anne-Marie, for that. And I at the end, I'm going to hand over to Aisha just to do the final word. But before they do that, I want to sincerely thank our panel, Amoke, Sungpo and Andrea, for their wonderful questioning. And they put a lot of work into thinking about the questions that we're going to ask. And we just don't have enough time. We definitely need another time with you. And to thank Professor Dame Anne-Marie Rafferty for her generosity, her enthusiasm. She said earlier on about knowledge is power, and she's one lady that has always never held on to her power and shared and been so generous with everybody else that has crossed her path. And even with all her brilliance, she was always so kind to other people, no matter who they were. So it's really such a privilege to have and listen to you, and I hope we get an opportunity again. And I just want to say that the Nursing Now Challenge, there's huge opportunities, and I just want to flag that, like, there's even an article in the Nursing Times. It's the January cover feature, and only for Nursing Now it wouldn't be there. So it's titled "Ones to Watch: The Early Career Nurses and Midwives on a Mission to Lead Global Change." And like, isn't that superb to think that young nurses are on the front of the cover of the Nursing Times? And there's so many things to say, you know, and please do join us for the 1000 Challenge Showcase on the 14th of February. And of course, it'd be very remiss if I didn't say that, as we are now the Global Book Club team session, the next one will be with Dr. Barbara Sturwell discussing her book, which is The Global Health and Nursing, a New Narrative for the 21st Century. And I know she has lots of people who have fed into that. And that session will take place on the 6th of March at 2 p.m. at GMT. And don't forget, the website and the social media and all that is there. So I'm not going to say anything else except for to thank Burdett for all their funding and support, and to hand over the floor to the wonderful leader of the Nursing Now Challenge, which is Aisha. So I'll give her the last word, and thank you, everyone.
Oh, wonderful. Elizabeth, I have got nothing more to say. You've said it all. You've done such a wonderful job. And I'm sure everyone listening who has taken part today has enjoyed it hugely. I see so many wonderful faces of colleagues from all over the world. It's absolutely wonderful, from Sudan to Spain to Europe to Africa. We have all regions. Elizabeth, what a wonderful job you've done of chairing. Anne-Marie, absolutely wonderful. You know I'm your biggest fan. I used to see and hear about Anne-Marie when I was an early career nurse, and I was like, how can I be like her? And I am blessed and humbled to say that she is now a great friend and is just so inspirational and very generous, as you've said, Elizabeth. And we need more Anne-Maries, let me tell you, and that is you all out here today. Please take time to think about joining Nursing Now Challenge. We do what we say. It says on the tin, we give you opportunities, we let you lead, we enable you to have a voice. It is a wonderful space of support, of generosity, of kindness, but also of action. There is a big year coming up. We are seeing the State of the World's Nursing Report launched, and I see the wonderful Rawida from Emro region, who is also on our advisory board. The State of the World's Nursing is coming up. So this is an opportunity, as Anne-Marie has just said. We have to get ready. We are already doing that. Nursing Now Challenge members are already being supported. We are planning for our Challengers Committee specific education training around how we advocate, how we can take our voice, how we can take our message, what is our story. out there about the zone, about the state of the world's nursing report. Data helps us have a dialogue and informs decision making, and that's what we want to do. We want to be seen as scientists as well as clinicians, where the art of nursing is at the forefront but informed by evidence. We will also be supporting the implementation of the strategic directions for nursing and midwifery. If you have not seen either of the first zone, and then the second one will be coming out in spring, but the SDNM, that is a really interesting document produced by the WHO. It was signed up for by the member states. It has policy priority areas. Even if what you do is you read that and you take that and you ask your organizations, governments, policymakers, did you know this exists? Do you know it does? How are we addressing this? We can help. We can help with this. So these are all things that you can get involved with, and many more. Global Solutions Initiative. It's absolutely wonderful. We are packed out with things that you can get engaged with and enjoy. And that's what we want you to do. You need to own your career now, your profession now, and in the future, because others have gone before us, as we have heard, and paved the way. And if you didn't know about that, please spread that word to other people so they understand why we are able to be where we are now. But we have so much more to do moving forward to ensure the safety of our profession, the safety of nursing as a profession, and why we need to be educated, why we are a science base, educated in universities, making complex decision making from bedside to government and ministerial level. We can do it all because that is what we do best. So I'm going to leave that with you there. Thank you so much, everyone, today. Blessings to Elizabeth and Anne-Marie and to our three wonderful early career nurses. And I know Claire Cable is here as well, our Chief Exec at Burdett. Thank you to Claire and the support of Burdett. Have a wonderful day, evening, morning, wherever you are, and we will see you at the next book club. Join Nursing Now Challenge. You will not regret it.
Sold, Aisha, sold.
Sold to the highest bidder. And it's free.
I know. Thank you so much. Brilliant.
Thank you, everyone. Take care. Bye. 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 Bye.